The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good morning, I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to a special program on Wednesday the 29th, 2 p.m. at one of my favorite places, the Sheen Center, 18 Bleecker Street in New York City. It's a play entitled Miracle on South Division Street. And I'm going to be in a talkback with Mary Lou Pagano, who is the executive director of the Sheen Center. We'll be speaking about the intersection of faith, identity, and the importance of storytelling as a means to interfaith dialogue. So join me Sunday at the Sheen Center, 2 p.m. Reverend Bernard, we are most privileged to have with us the 46th controller of the city of New York, the Honorable Mark Levine, whom both of us have been privileged to know for some time. And it's a difficult time to be a controller, but I can think of no one else right now in the city who could do it better. So welcome, Mark Levine.
Well, Rabbi, thank you, and Reverend, thank you. Just so appreciate both of your leadership, and your voices are more important than ever. Honored to be on the show again.
Thank you.
And look, I'm really privileged to be in this role. I do think that the role of comptroller is important at any time. But given all the challenges now in the budget and the economy, et cetera, I think this role is more important than ever. And I'm all in to fight for the city, to fight for our economy, and to fight for our budget.
Well, with that said, that's a great place to start because the governor is pushing an idea along with the mayor to tax, put a real estate tax on some of those high-priced condos in the city. Can you speak to that?
Yes, these are high-priced homes that are not occupied by someone who lives in New York City. These are people who maybe have an apartment for occasional visits that, or even as investment properties. And these are often extremely wealthy people because these are apartments that cost $5 million and up. And yes, they're known as pied-à-terres. And those folks are not paying income tax here because they're not claiming residence. And so, in my opinion, they're not contributing their fair share to the cost of operating city government, even if they're here for months out of the year and benefit from all sorts of city services. So for me, this is a matter of fairness that people who are wealthy enough to be able to have a second home valued at $5, $10, $25 million are just going to give a little bit more to help us pay for essential city services, from police to fire to parks to sanitation.
Rabbi, if I may, though, because I have a follow-up question, because I was reading an article in the city about this whole thing, and they were comparing $87 million penthouse apartments in the city, but when it comes to how they're market valued to pay taxes, they're valued, an $87 million condo, they valued at $3.8 million and paying city tax on that. It speaks to the convoluted tax system here in New York City. How do you respond to that?
This is actually very complicated. And it's true, our property tax system, it's just desperate for reform. It's inefficient and confusing and very unequal. It actually taxes a brownstone in, say, East New York at a much higher rate than a comparable brownstone in, say, Park Slope. So we've got to reform the property tax system. And actually, past efforts to reform have included something like a pied-à-terres tax, but it's never gotten to the finish line because it's also complicated, politically complicated. There's something else here as well, which is that the assessed value of an apartment generally has nothing to do with what it would cost to buy the apartment. And this is especially a problem in co-ops, which are so many of the expensive homes in New York City, where really it's the building that has the assessment. They're not assessing individual units per se. So that adds another layer of complexity here. But I think these things can be worked out. It's going to take some work. But ultimately, this would help generate much needed income for the city. And I do think it's a basic matter of fairness.
We're talking with Controller Mark Levine, 46th Controller of the City of New York. Controller, let me ask you, what do you say to those people who will tell you, look, keep taxing me, and I'm going to leave, and you can have your pied-à-terre, try to sell that. Don't you think there is some merit to that argument of people just leaving?
Sure. Look, I think we need to take that very seriously always, especially for questions like income taxes, where you could pick up and change your residency. And look, we did raise income taxes in 2021, and it didn't cause a mass exodus, but I still think we need to be cautious. We just don't know how this will play out in the future. Pied-à-terre tax, a little bit different, because these are people who already are not claiming New York as their place of residence.
Right.
So,
right.
But I've heard from people in the real estate industry who are concerned that this would mean people are less likely to buy these types of homes, and that could impact the market. And of course, there's an upside because it might make it easier for New Yorkers to buy these homes. But we should be wary of that. But at the end of the day, I think this is probably the kind of tax that's least likely to cause those kinds of disruptions, because again, the people who already don't live here, and their homes, which you can't move. So I think on balance, this is still a prudent thing.
So, Controller, let me ask you this. Explain the mentality to me of those who will talk about the budget gap and keep hiring more people, keep spending more. How, you know you're spending more than you should. You wouldn't do in your private household, and yet you do it with government funds. When I say you, I'm talking about a number of individuals in government.
It's a problem.
But what's the thinking behind that? That it's not my money, it's government's money. It's, we'll find it elsewhere. Let the wealthy pay. We need these expenditures. What is the mentality?
I thought you were a Republican, Rabbi. I didn't know you were against taxing spend. You can now please answer his question. Yeah. I want to know.
Oh my goodness!
Well, it's spend then tax. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Look, we've had a 16-year bull run on Wall Street since the financial crisis of 2008, and it's true that expenses have been growing really fast in New York. Certainly faster than inflation and faster than population growth. But because Wall Street has done so well, and we have essentially avoided a recession. Now, COVID was a unique moment, but there we had this huge infusion of billions of dollars of federal aid, and we quickly got beyond it. So look, I was in the city council for 8 years, and our problem was how to divide surplus every year. And this is the first time since the financial crisis where our problem is the opposite. It's how to deal with a budget shortfall. And I think we've gotten a little bit out of practice at finding savings and, of course, investing in important programs, but making sure that those programs don't get out of control. And, I'll give you an example of the kind of thing that worries me. We have a program which is actually wonderful. It's housing vouchers. It's like a New York City version of Section 8. It's called City Fets. And it's very helpful, very important for families who might be in a homeless shelter, and helps them pay for private housing. But guys, it's growing by 4% a month. And it's now over 70,000 households. And we project that it will hit something like $2.6 billion next year, which is, for perspective, more than the entire budget of HPD. And it's not sustainable to have a city program growing at 4% a month, which means it doubles every year and a half. And it's going to be tough, but that's the kind of thing that we're just going to have to slow the growth of it. And I hope that we have what it takes to do that. But that's the kind of decision that we haven't had to make for a lot of years as the budget has boomed and we've only had surpluses.
Controller, we've got to go to a break, but when we come back, I want to ask you about a statement that you made that Wall Street has done so well, because Wall Street has done so well, but for who? We got to take a break. Stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Red Apple Radio Networks.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rev and the Rabbi. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And we are speaking with Controller Mark Levine, 46 controller of the city of New York. Rev?
Yeah, so, we say quick statements because Wall Street has done so well, but put on the brakes for a minute. As we were talking about during the break, the top 10% of Americans own 93% of the stocks. And that creates a massive wealth gap. So it's doing well, but for who and how do the rest of us benefit?
Yeah, I mean, this is the contradiction of New York's economy right now. In so many ways, we're booming. And it's not just the stock market. Offices are being rented again, even in high-end buildings. There's huge demand for housing, including luxury housing. But on the other hand, rents are out of control. We've passed a very unfortunate milestone in Manhattan. For the first time ever, rents are now at a median of $5,000 a month. Never seen it. So this is really a threat. And it's part of why we have a record number of people in our homeless shelters now, something like 85,000 a night, which is way beyond what we've seen historically. Also, I should mention that the job market has been a weak spot in the economic picture for us. And we've basically stopped creating jobs. We're flat. That's particularly tough for young people. Talk to a person in their 20s who's just out of college. Very hard time for them to get a job. And the unemployment rate in general is ticking up, and it's hitting Black New Yorkers particularly hard as well. So there are warning signs. And by the way, look ahead, and you see the possible impact of the Iran war and the ongoing tariff policy and AI on the horizon. And I'm actually worried about this job situation. It's probably my number one economic concern for New Yorkers. But Rev, your point is right. We have enormous inequality in this economy. It is arguably the worst it's been since the Gilded Age. And I fear that it's getting worse, in part driven by some of these technological shifts. AI is creating a lot of wealth, but also, I think, creating a lot of inequality. And I worry that will be accelerated as the technology moves forward. So I think we need ways to deal with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the paradox is that if Wall Street doesn't, I said the paradox of this is if Wall Street doesn't do well, the worker still gets hurt.
And also, who's doing a lot of the hiring? I mean, it's very easy to point an accusatory finger at others, but those others that we criticize benefit us. So it's got to be, you got to be very careful with generalizations. Controller, you made some interesting proposals. One, I think, was historic last week, wasn't it? About housing, investing some pension funds in housing. Can you talk about that?
Right. Well, look, yes, in the midst of this terrible affordability crisis, we need to build more housing, more affordable housing, and we're short of financing to do that. We put forward a plan that'll help solve that problem by investing in a prudent way $4 billion of New York City's pension funds to create and preserve affordable housing all over New York City, new construction and preserving existing affordable housing, helping to convert vacant office buildings into residences. Huge potential here. Would be far and away the biggest investment we've ever made through our pension funds. And I think it would be a jolt of energy to the market to build the housing that we so desperately need.
And what about unemployment, right? I'm sorry, just as a follow-up, you also have a proposal for youth unemployment, Controller. Am I right?
I've called attention to the crisis, and I was speaking about it here a moment ago. Look, the solution to youth unemployment, to employment overall in New York City, is to make this a place where companies want to hire, where they want to grow, where they want to invest. And right now, we're kind of treading water on that. There's not been a mass exodus of companies, but the growth is happening elsewhere. You look at JP Morgan Chase. It's great that they just built this tower on Park Avenue, but they have more employees in Texas than they do in New York. Goldman Sachs, Lower Manhattan, they're not leaving Manhattan, but all their growth is outside of New York City. And I'm just seeing news coming in right now that Citadel, which is a major hedge fund, which had been proposing to build another tower on Park Avenue with, I think, like 2,000 jobs, is now pausing to reconsider. So I think we got to be wary of this trend. And we have to ask ourselves, what will it take to get firms investing and hiring here? I think partly we can focus on those sectors that are growing, like AI and technology and life sciences and green technology, and do more to help attract them to make this. I think this should be one of the strongest concentrations of AI companies in the world. I think we could be. We have so much talent here. I think partly this is also an education challenge. We got to make sure that CUNY and even K-12 is aligned with the skills that employers need in this fast-changing landscape. There's many challenges here. The bottom line is this needs to be a place where people want to grow their businesses and hire for the benefit of all New Yorkers.
Yeah, let me speak to the pension fund, because Atlantic Yards, that is partnering to build some 5,000 units of affordable housing. Of course, it's going to be mixed, but those kind of things are happening at the same time that these towers are being built, correct?
Yes, look, this is a big project. It's been a long time coming, 20 years since Atlantic Yards was kicked off. And there's been a lot of delays on this large amount of affordable housing. It's not easy because they have to build a deck over active train tracks. So it's going to be difficult to finance, but it's very important. And we're also looking at that deal as something that we could potentially invest in. So that's an example of the kind of thing that needs help on financing and would yield great results for New Yorkers.
You know, a number of times, Controller, people talk about a rainy day fund that we have, that we're going to solve the budget gap. We have to take money from the rainy day fund. Discuss that fund with us.
Yeah, look, just like you have a piggy bank at home.
No, the Rev does. The Rev, he has the piggy as well as the bank.
He wouldn't have a piggy
He's a whole,
bank. He'd have
he's a whole pen
not
there.
the piggy.
Not sure what the kosher version of that is.
Yeah.
But anyway. So the city of New York has a place where it puts money aside. It's called the Rainy Day Fund. And the idea is when times are good, you put money in. But if we get into a crisis like a recession or a natural disaster or, God forbid, another pandemic, you can take out. Unfortunately, that's not really how it's being managed. It has relatively little in it right now, despite the fact that we've had years of booms in Wall Street. And this year, this mayor's initial proposal actually called for withdrawing a couple billion out of our reserves. And we put forward a plan to make sure that we do better going forward. It would give you strict rules. And it would say, in times that are good, if a lot of tax revenue is coming in, if the economy is growing, there's a formula that says you got to put money into the rainy day fund. And it limits when you can take out. And it has a list of circumstances, like a recession, like a large terrorist attack, et cetera.
Controller, we come to
in your case, it takes 8 years.
Yeah, we've come to the end of the interview. Just want to say, I think people listening to you feel relieved to some extent. They're heartened that you are sitting there as a watchdog of the city funds and a great protector of people's earnings, of people's their hopes and aspirations going forward. You need to make sure the city is solvent when you're at home. So thank you, and make sure that I'm listed as a recipient on the Rev's pensions, so I know that when I retire, I'll be very comfortable.
You want that by check or electronic funds transfer?
Cash.
Exactly.
Wire transfer, and do it now.
EFT,
Don't wait. Do it now. Thank you so much. Always, you're a great friend. You're a great leader, and we're very fortunate to have you.
Thank you, Controller.
Bye-bye.
And stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi. We'll be right back right here on Red Apple Radio Network.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rev and the Rabbi, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, we have someone with us who's been on before and has tremendous insights about global affairs. And I'm talking about Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. His bio reads he's an American religious and political commentator and a medical doctor. My mother would argue with that greatly. She'd say, "You put that you're a doctor first, then you can put everything after that." But he really is he's very refreshing because he offers thoughts that you don't hear in enough places. So, Dr. Jasser, great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. Always appreciate catching up with you.
And can we break that down? American religious and political commentator and medical doctor, which is your day job. But explain, American religious and political commentator.
Well, my whole life I've been very dedicated to not only being an American, served in the Navy 11 years, but after 9/11 really felt that we needed to treat the core problem, which is not a symptom, which is terrorism, but the ideology. And as somebody who loves my faith and has a very strong relationship with God, I've always felt that the people making money from Islam are the problem. The Islamists, the theocrats, the institutional Islamists, and the people not making money from Islam, but doctors, attorneys, engineers, the rest of us who have real livings are the ones who need to sort of get back a hold of our faith. So I have a strong relationship with God, but a very contentious relationship with organized Islam and the institutions of Islam. So that's really where that comes from.
So clarify for us some of the misunderstandings about your faith. I have a lot of, Rabbi and I have a lot of Muslim leaders, imams that we interact with and have a wonderful collaboration towards dealing with the issues within our society. Clear up some of the misunderstandings, if you will.
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked it that way because I'll tell you, I think it's an apologetic for Muslims to say that these are misunderstandings. I think the Muslims that believe it's misunderstandings feel that they just want to stick their head in the sand and pretend there's no problems. And the reality is we have a massive cancer. And as a doctor, I will tell you that the patient is, Islam continues to exist as a faith despite Muslims, not really because of Muslims. We've really not taken back the leadership of our communities. We've not addressed the core problems. Our faith has been stuck in the 12th, 13th century without any modernization. And if you look at most of the Muslim majority countries, terrorism and radicalism, be it from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Islamist, Khomeinist in Iran, or the militant theocrats, if you will, we've come to the West. Many of our families, like mine, have escaped that, but yet we've come here to celebrate, to practice our faith personally in a Judeo-Christian culture in the West. But we've not really brought our own faith into the 21st century. So it's not really misunderstanding. It's a sense of now the misunderstanding is that is Islam reconcilable with democracy? I have a debate that I gave a speech at Oxford in October 2024, and I said, as somebody who loves my faith, currently Islam is not compatible with democracy, but do I think it can be? Absolutely. That's why we've been doing all this work, and that just like our founding fathers felt that there can be no establishment of religion through government, and they worked against the Church of England and wanted to separate church and state in 1789 in our Constitution. Islam has not gone through that same revolution, and that's why I think what's so important about what's happening in Iran. It's the first time in 1,000 years now that Islam in that many centuries has had an actual process of defeating theocracy, which is really what we need to wake up and do.
So if that's
go ahead, Rabbi.
So if that's the case, what is a plausible solution, or is there one, to the current crisis? Is it, war? War is the only solution? There's no diplomatic solution? What do you see as, how do we navigate through this, given the mentality of the other side that many cases would prefer to die than live?
Okay, so number one is you need to have a correct trajectory historically. So, if you look at the 30 Years' War in Europe, there was 10 million people almost that perished within 30 years in every country in Europe that was fighting against theocrats. And so the process in the Islamic world, I'm not sure it's going to mirror that, but it's going to be, similarly internal revolutions within each country, and each one's going to have different stages. That process is going to evolve, and every country will have its own type of evolution, but the historical arc will be the same, is that if the West take side within the House of Islam. And it's not only that we're against radical Islam and against terrorism, but we advance what we're for, and we have an offense to take the side of the dissidents within Iran and within Syria and those who are fighting against theocracy versus, I was listening to Ambassador Barak yesterday talk about, he's the ambassador to Turkey. And I can't believe he's an American. He's basically saying, well, the Middle East has always had dictators. They're going to have dictators. And, we can't pretend they're going to become democracies. And, I'm like, this is an American saying this? America should be advancing the ideas of liberty, should be taking on the Marxists and jihadists of the Chinese Communist Party and the Russian autocrats and others, instead of just sort of doing the Game of Thrones thing we did in the 20th century and helping people who really don't share our worldview. So I think if you look at the arc of history, if we start weighing in on the free market of ideas on the ground in these countries, I think it'll be headed in the better direction. I think the theocrats and the autocrats will be defeated because at the end of the day, people want to be free, and the Marxist jihadist axis will be defeated by liberty. But if we take a pass and we don't start pushing Muslims to take ownership for liberty and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I think the autocrats will win and the theocrats will win.
See, that's important, and that's why I asked in the beginning for clarification, because the majority of people on the ground, John Q. Citizen, they have bought into so much of the rhetoric that they think that the Muslim community, the Islamic community, is monolithic. But they're not, because you talk about America for Islam, pushing an agenda that shares the values of the United States. Speak to that difference.
Yeah, now, it's so important because, I, as an American, was educated and rooted in liberal thought, in classical liberalism, where I did not feel that I could push my ideas upon others and understood individualism versus tribalism, understood the need to have free speech. And as I accepted God, understood that I needed to question God first before I felt that I could accept him. So all of these types of thought processes as we mature, long before I could really understand the translations of the Quran and get into the theological arguments of various schools of Sharia thought, I had a strong relationship with God that my parents taught me through my superego and my conscience, etc. So to those who believe that Islam is irreconcilable, I would tell them if the recipe was wrong, to say that somehow we get our values from the book is just erroneous. Most of us bring our values to the book, and we then interpret it in a way that's modern, and we can then start to say, well, what applies to today, what applies to the 7th century, etc. So that's part of the liberal education.
So let me ask you, given the clear choices how people would prefer freedom, how do you explain this movement in America where you have young people siding with Iran and faulting America for the problem?
That is such an important question. And again, it runs to the core is why do smart people become bigots and anti-Semitic? It's because of moral inversion. Because all of a sudden, it is no longer, we've lost what's right and wrong. It's no longer, those are the same people who think that, well, extreme socialism is good, so we steal from people in order to give to the poor, so stealing becomes okay. Killing becomes okay because terrorism is now, violence is okay because it's no longer, that's civil disobedience. Even if we're destroying structures and killing innocent people in restaurants or whatever it might be, that's okay because the ends justifies the means. So you've lost, and this gets back to the original question you asked me, which was, why is my faith so important? You cannot bring modern communities and people into the modern age without a moral compass that's rooted in a fear of God and humility. And, I've talked to so many of my religious, mentors in my life, be it Muslim, Jewish, Christian. At the end of the day, what we fear and the reason why we do what's right and wrong is not because of movements, but because we worry about what God wants us to do and we're humble before God. And without
Doctor,
that, you can't have a moral society.
I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but we've got to go to a break. But when we come back, I want to talk about this confusion of conscience that we're experiencing in our society. Stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi. We'll be right back, right here on Red Apple Radio Networks.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rev and the Rabbi, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And we are speaking with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He's an American religious and political commentator and happens to be a medical doctor.
Happens to be.
Yeah. Well, it comes after all of the other titles.
Like
and he's also a doctor.
Become a medical doctor.
Yeah.
We won't even ask him how many years it took to get there. But doctor, the culture wars have not merely divided societies. They've disoriented the inner, what you were talking about, moral compass of individuals. And what we're witnessing is not just disagreement over values, but what I call a deeper confusion of conscience, where there's this destabilization of how people even discern right from wrong. We don't agree anymore. We used to have a shared value system where we could say, okay, we agree, that's wrong, that's right. But not anymore, doctor. Speak to that.
Yeah, and then this is so important, is that the DEI movement, a lot of the identity politic movement was about retribalizing the West. And all of a sudden, the Enlightenment process, de Tocqueville wrote about in his book, he said the reason democracy in America was so successful is that they didn't need military rule because they feared God first. And they had a moral society. They had a very heavy church-going population, much more so than Europe. And thus, since they were a moral society, they didn't need military authority from government. And thus, government was for the people and by the people, and separated and rendered unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's, as the Bible says. So that retribalization of identity politics that is also part of the culture wars is radicalizing our society. And this is what I testified to Congress about when Peter King asked me to testify in 2011. I said, listen, you guys might think this is just about Muslim radicalization and Al-Qaeda and then, as ISIS was coming, et cetera. I said, no, they're going to radicalize the far left, the Democrats, the political movements, et cetera, because radicalization is not something unique to Muslims. And Chief Justice Thomas said it last week in the University of Texas, Austin. He gave a speech about progressivism. And he said progressivism is about basically rendering unto government what actually should be the domain of God, that the progressivists think that rights come from government, not from God. And I was listening to him saying, boy, you could replace the word Islamism with progressivism, and you would basically get the same answer. The Islamists think rights come from Islam or from the government that's Islamic rather than coming from God. So we need normal people in politics. We need normal, moral people in activism in society, and to get back to the roots of Western modernity, which is about the individual rights being protected over the tribe's rights. And that's why America is not a democracy, it's a republic. The Bill of Rights protects every individual because left to their own devices, as Ben Franklin said, 3 wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner is democracy. So you have to be able to protect the individual.
It's interesting.
But we're redefining terms like justice, freedom, identity. Narratives are changing. Rabbi and I have spoken about this. We are arguing as to who is the victim and who is the oppressor. Yeah. Because you have those who are protesting, against what's going on the sides of the Palestinians, and they see the Palestinians the oppressors. And then Jews are being, troubled by anti-Semitism, and they see themselves as the victim. How do we decide? What's the higher moral influence on our conscience and our understanding of right and wrong?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And every time we have a debate, we should be able to, in comfort and calmness, talk about what are the facts that we agree on and what are the things we disagree on, and no longer simply, if you look at the the conspiracy advocates, they will use terms like obviously or clearly, and without, nobody's even asking questions anymore. It's as if somehow their version of the story is the truth. So first we have to figure out what the facts are, and once we agree on those, see if it's real victimology, if there's real victims, or it's actually fabricated victimization. And you find out now in Israel, for example, so much of the stories were just fabricated about what was actually happening to the Palestinians of Gaza.
It's interesting, Doctor. I've had a number of former Iranian nationals coming to this country, now living here, and saying to me, thank God for Israel. And when you talk to many of the people who can't speak publicly, but privately in Iran, they'll tell you, thank God for Israel. And yet you have so many, Americans included, who will say Israel is causing the problems leading America into this war. I was talking with a senator about the recent vote where they voted against Iron Dome and bulldozers, and she voted for, not against it, but for it. And I said, what's the reason you have so many Democrats voting against it? She said, well, it's anti-Bibi. So I said to her, but we're talking about Iron Dome. We're talking about protecting civilians. How does it make sense that that's against Netanyahu if you're protecting those who are innocent? And for that, there's no answer. So there is this, not moral clarity, but immoral clarity. People see what's right and wrong through such a different lens.
Lens. Right.
Yeah. Doctor?
It's a parallel moral universe, Doctor.
Yeah. And they demonize individuals, be it Prime Minister Netanyahu, be it President Trump, and all of a sudden the policy doesn't matter anymore. The reality on the ground doesn't matter anymore. It's all a demonization of President. Thomas Friedman was giving an interview just a couple weeks ago, and he was being asked. They asked him, isn't this a good thing that the regime that's slaughtering its own people, killing dissidents, and wreaking terror across the Middle East is ending? He goes, yeah, but the problem is because Netanyahu's doing it and Trump is, it's more of a bad. I'm like, and all of a sudden you saw a full disclosure that it really wasn't about moral clarity. It was about him hating the political partisanship of what was happening, which I think is the reality. And I think eventually it'll become obvious to everybody that Israel is the little America in the Middle East, and the same values that America was founded on in 1789 when our Constitution became real, Israel was founded on in 1948.
And Friedman is regarded by so many as a great political thinker and commentator. And yet when you read that, you said, he doesn't deserve to hold that role. He shouldn't be. You shouldn't have a column. Because he's really anti-Israel, anti-America. It's always anti-Trump, Netanyahu. It doesn't matter that people are fighting for freedom and ready to give their lives for freedom. He sees it like what's best. What's best is if Trump loses and Netanyahu loses. I mean, it's crazy. It's simply crazy.
Doctor, I just want to, and just again, another point of clarification. Just because you support the nation of Israel, that doesn't necessarily mean you agree with all of its tactics and all of its policies and decisions. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Like
every
America.
Country has its own. Every country has its own internal debates, and I may have some disagreements. And I'm an American, and I will have my debates on American policy, but I will not allow. At the end of the day, I think that it is in America's interest to not only support our ally Israel, but it is the strongest ally we have in the world because of the neighborhood it lives in and because of its history of what led it to exist post-Holocaust. And we need to support that because just as our founding father, George Washington, talked about the special relationship he had with the Jews in America in the late 18th century, there's a special relationship that America has with the Jews in Israel that we need to protect, because if we do not, as every time in history has shown in the thousands of years of Jewish history, it will end up destroying the rest of our civilization if we don't recognize anti-Semitism when
Israel and America cherish dissent. If you pick up an Israeli paper, you will see major disagreements. But at the end of it all, both sides love the country. There are people who disagree with American policies, but yet love the country. I think one of the problems we're facing today is you have those who don't love the country, who would like to see a different administration, a different way of dealing with issues, and all of a sudden the enemy becomes the person who is the friend. There's been a total transformation. Israel is now the enemy in the eyes of many, when it has been a great friend, liberating people.
Yeah, but Rabbi, what the doctor said is important, and you and I have had this conversation. The fact that we can support Israel, right, and at the same time, it doesn't mean that we agree totally with all of its tactics, all of its policies.
Isn't that true with America?
Because
it's true of any democracy.
But you know what it is? If you say you support Israel, that means you support everything that Israel has done, the government has done, and that is not true. It's not true there. It's not true here in America.
It's a double standard. Doctor, there are people listening saying, I want to help this guy. I want to promote his organization. What should they do?
Yeah, our organization website is AIF Democracy, AIF as in forum, democracy.org. And, I'm also running for Congress, which is important. And I think we need folks that can flip the script. And our website for my congressional campaign on a district that's a swing district here in Arizona is Z4AZ.com.
Okay. Excellent. Doctor, always a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you so much.
Rabbi?
Yeah. No, I've known Dr. Jasser for many, many years, and he says things that others are afraid to say. And he's a person of great strength, great courage, and I'm one of the admirers, as many others are.
Yeah. Thank you, Doctor, for being on the program.
Thank you. God bless you. Appreciate it.
God bless. And we've come to the close of another episode of The Rev and the Rabbi right here on Sunday morning. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, God bless.
Thanks for listening to The Rev and the Rabbi. You can hear The Rev and the Rabbi Sunday mornings at 7. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?